Mayor Tiffany Henyard's once promising political career took a sharp and disastrous turn when her tenure as the first black female mayor of Dalton, Illinois, was overshadowed by accusations of financial mismanagement and corruption. Initially hailed as a symbol of progress and hope, Henyard's election was seen as a historic moment for a town long plagued by economic struggles and political underrepresentation. For many, she represented the potential for change, a beacon of hope in a town yearning for revitalization and a new direction. However, this promising new chapter quickly unraveled as Henyard became embroiled in a scandal involving the embezzlement of taxpayer funds and the lavish misuse of public resources for personal indulgences. What should have been a beacon of progress instead became a cautionary tale. Henyard's extravagant spending, including first-class flights, five-star hotel stays, and luxury purchases, soon sparked public outrage. Particularly shocking was the revelation that she had spent a staggering $110,000 on a stay at the Four Seasons Hotel in Atlanta. This was especially difficult for the community to swallow, as residents of Dalton were struggling with financial hardships while their mayor lived a life of excess under Henyard's leadership. The town's financial stability deteriorated. Projects meant to address the town's economic decline either stalled or failed to materialize. Despite her promises of revitalization, Henyard's actions led to mounting debt, insufficient resources, and an inability to address Dalton's most pressing needs. The once hopeful future for Dalton seemed to crumble as residents watched their elected leaders' misuse of public funds and unchecked indulgence become public knowledge. Dalton's infrastructure was left in disrepair. Essential services were underfunded, and key projects were indefinitely postponed, creating a stark contrast between the mayor's lavish lifestyle and the struggles of the people she was elected to serve. This betrayal of public trust caused a deep rift between Henyard and the community. Her extravagant personal expenditures became a symbol of the growing disparity between the political elite and the average citizen. Local government officials who had initially supported her vision for the town were forced to distance themselves from her as the severity of her actions became impossible to ignore. The community, once hopeful for change, was now left disillusioned and uncertain about its future. Investigations into Henyard's financial activities only intensified as the public demanded answers about how taxpayer dollars had been diverted for her personal benefit rather than being used to address Dalton's many challenges. Henyard's political career, once full of promise, now hung in the balance as legal repercussions loomed large. Her fall from grace was both swift and dramatic. The reputation she had once built as a trailblazer and symbol of hope lay in ruin. Her actions not only damaged the office of mayor, but also left a scar on the town of Dalton. As the first black female mayor, Henyard's rise had been a historic moment, a beacon for marginalized communities, but her downfall stood as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of accountability in leadership. What was meant to be a new era for Dalton had left the town with an uncertain future. The public's trust had been shattered, and its hopes for revitalization dashed. Henyard's legacy would not be one of progress, but of broken promises and a cautionary tale about the perils of corruption and the need for transparency in public office. As legal battles intensified and the town of Dalton struggled to recover from the financial devastation caused by Henyard's actions, her fall from grace became a reminder of the destructive power of corruption and the consequences of inadequate oversight in public office. Once hailed as a beacon of hope and progress, Henyard's leadership quickly descended into scandal. Her refusal to cooperate with efforts to resolve the town's growing financial crisis only deepened the turmoil. Henyard vetoed measures to impose stricter financial controls and blocked the appointment of an independent auditor, creating a gridlock within the town's administration and leaving Dalton in a state of financial and political chaos. The residents, already reeling from revelations about her lavish spending, such as a $43,000 Amazon shopping spree and the aforementioned $110,000 stay at the Four Seasons, grew increasingly frustrated with her refusal to take responsibility for her role in Dalton's collapse. Public outrage reached a fever pitch, and town hall meetings quickly turned into heated protests, with social media campaigns demanding her resignation. Instead of acknowledging her misconduct, Henyard portrayed herself as a misunderstood leader, deflecting blame despite overwhelming evidence of her financial mismanagement. At one town meeting, Henyard's bizarre behavior only deepened the divide between her and the community. She showed up with a golden microphone, an ostentatious gesture that stunned the audience and highlighted her apparent disconnect from the gravity of the situation. In another incident, a DJ allegedly played Rihanna's "Better Have My Money" during a public meeting, seemingly in an attempt to diffuse tension in a way many saw as tone-deaf and disrespectful. These actions, combined with her ongoing refusal to take accountability, further alienated the people she had been elected to serve as Dalton grappled with the financial wreckage left in Henyard's wake. The town became bitterly divided. Her supporters from the early days now publicly expressed regret for their misguided endorsement. The trust they had placed in her was shattered, leaving Dalton at a political and financial crossroads. Henyard's power weakened under the weight of mounting legal investigations and widespread calls for reform. The town teetered on the edge of a crucial turning point. Her once promising leadership had now left Dalton with a fractured community and a bleak outlook for the future. The damage caused by her actions was undeniable, but it also presented Dalton with an opportunity for renewal. Despite Henyard's continued opposition to efforts to curb the town's excessive spending and her bizarre antics that deepened the sense of alienation, there remained hope that the town could recover. Her fall from grace would ultimately be a moment of reckoning for Dalton, a reminder of the destructive power of corruption, the importance of accountability, and the need for new leadership focused on restoring trust, stability, and hope as the fallout from Tiffany Henyard's scandalous tenure as mayor of Dalton, Illinois, continues to unfold. A growing sense of frustration and uncertainty envelopes the community. What had once been a hopeful chapter for the town, marked by Henyard's election as the first black female mayor, has swiftly turned into a tale of financial mismanagement, personal misconduct, and public betrayal. The town's residents, who had once placed their faith in Henyard's promises of revitalization and change, are now grappling with the devastation left in her wake. As the crisis deepens, it is clear that the road to recovery will be long, difficult, and uncertain. In the early days of her administration, Henyard represented a symbol of progress. Her election was celebrated as a historic milestone for Dalton, a town plagued by economic hardship and political underrepresentation. For many, she embodied the hope of a new era, one where effective leadership would address the town's challenges and guide it toward a brighter future. However, as time went on, Henyard's actions quickly betrayed the very ideals she had promised to uphold. Accusations of financial misconduct began to surface, and by 2022, reports detailing Henyard's reckless spending habits began to emerge. Among the most shocking revelations was a $43,000 one-day Amazon shopping spree, which caused outrage among residents already struggling with Dalton's financial instability. Additionally, her use of first-class flights and stays at upscale hotels further fueled public suspicion that she had misused taxpayer dollars for her own personal indulgences. The public's trust, which had been built on the hope of a revitalized community, was shattered as Henyard's lavish lifestyle contrasted sharply with the town's financial hardships. This betrayal of public trust only deepened as Henyard continued to deflect responsibility and refused to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. Her tenure, once seen as a beacon of change, had quickly devolved into a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the consequences of financial mismanagement in public office. The growing frustration among residents was palpable, and the town's once hopeful future seemed to crumble as Henyard's refusal to cooperate with efforts to rebuild the town only added to the sense of dysfunction and despair. Despite the damage, there remained a glimmer of hope among Dalton's residents. They began to rally behind the idea that the lessons learned from Henyard's scandal could inspire much-needed reforms and restore public trust. Many saw the possibility of a renewed future for Dalton, one where leadership was defined by integrity, transparency, and accountability. However, Henyard's increasing erratic behavior and her refusal to cooperate with reform efforts left the town in limbo. Uncertain of its future, the town's frustration with Henyard reached a boiling point as residents longed for a return to leadership rooted in responsible governance. Henyard's refusal to address the growing accusations against her only intensified the crisis, and her increasingly bizarre behavior at public meetings further alienated the community. At one point, she arrived at a town hall meeting with a golden microphone, a gesture that stunned the audience and highlighted her apparent disconnect from the gravity of the situation. This was followed by an incident where a DJ played Rihanna's "Better Have My Money" at a public meeting, an action that many perceived as tone-deaf and disrespectful. These antics, coupled with her continued deflection and denial of accountability, deepened the divide between Henyard and the residents she was elected to serve. Her behavior signaled an alarming lack of seriousness and a failure to recognize the damage her actions had caused. As the public grew increasingly frustrated, many began to suspect that Henyard was attempting to evade justice altogether, particularly as rumors circulated that she was trying to flee the town before facing legal repercussions. Federal authorities, including the FBI, ramped up efforts to track her whereabouts as they investigated her financial activities. The prospect of Henyard fleeing before facing the consequences of her actions added to the growing sense of uncertainty in Dalton, and many residents questioned whether she had any intention or ability to lead effectively. With mounting debt, deteriorating infrastructure, and a lack of critical public services, Dalton's future seemed increasingly uncertain. The situation worsened when Deputy Police Chief Ellis Lacey was indicted on charges of bankruptcy fraud. This development raised suspicions of a broader pattern of financial misconduct within Henyard's administration, further fueling rumors of widespread corruption. Despite the mounting evidence and the growing calls for transparency, Henyard continued to oppose any efforts to bring in an independent auditor or allow external scrutiny of her administration. Her refusal to cooperate only exacerbated the crisis and further undermined the public's confidence in her leadership. As the town struggled to address the financial fallout from Henyard's leadership, Dalton's trustees took decisive action to limit her influence. They moved quickly to tighten financial controls, cut off access to local credit cards, and launch an independent investigation into Henyard's financial dealings. However, Henyard's defiance and obstructionism created a gridlock within the local government, preventing necessary reforms from moving forward. Efforts to create an emergency budget to address the town's urgent fiscal concerns were delayed or entirely blocked by the mayor. With the situation growing increasingly dire, residents began to worry about the potential loss of key personnel and vital public services. As debt spiraled and essential projects stalled, the town's infrastructure deteriorated, and the future of central public services hung in the balance. Dalton was at a critical juncture, and many feared that the town's already fragile state would worsen if the crisis remained unresolved. Amid mounting legal and public pressure, the town's trustees pressed on with their efforts to stabilize the administration, but Henyard's refusal to cooperate continued to paralyze the process. The damage done to Dalton's finances and political structure was severe, and it remained unclear whether the town would be able to recover. With the possibility of Henyard's eventual removal from office growing, many questioned whether Dalton could ever fully recover from the wreckage left behind by her administration. As the FBI investigation into Henyard's financial activities continued, the uncertainty surrounding the timeline and outcome of the case kept Dalton in a state of limbo. For many residents, the heightened investigation provided a glimmer of hope that justice would ultimately prevail. However, the community's anxieties about Henyard's refusal to accept accountability only intensified the sense of uncertainty. The damage caused by Henyard's leadership was undeniable, and the question on everyone's mind was whether Dalton could ever fully recover from the crisis. What had once been a town filled with hope for revitalization now found itself grappling with the aftermath of a scandal that had severely eroded public trust in local government. As the town's financial health continued to decline under Henyard's leadership, many feared that the damage was too great to overcome. Dalton's future remains uncertain as the community continues to navigate the wreckage of Henyard's time in office. The road to recovery will require a reckoning with the past and a commitment to transparency, integrity, and responsible governance. It remains to be seen whether Dalton can rebuild and chart a new course, or whether it will continue to sink further into turmoil. For now, the town finds itself at a crossroads, caught between a deteriorating financial situation, mounting public unrest, and the looming specter of legal consequences for its former mayor. The struggle for stability continues, but the path ahead remains fraught with challenges, and Dalton's future remains precarious. Dalton, Illinois, once filled with hope and potential under the leadership of Tiffany Henyard, now finds itself in the throes of a severe political and financial crisis. What began as a promising chapter for the town has quickly spiraled into a devastating tale of corruption, financial mismanagement, and a breakdown of public trust. As the FBI investigates Henyard's alleged financial misconduct, the town's future grows increasingly uncertain, with many wondering if Dalton can ever recover from the damage caused by her leadership. Elected as Dalton's first African-American female mayor in 2021, Henyard's tenure initially sparked excitement and optimism for a community long plagued by economic struggles and political underrepresentation. However, that optimism quickly turned to disillusionment as Henyard's actions in office began to raise serious concerns. Accusations of reckless spending and financial misconduct soon emerged, culminating in a $43,000 Amazon shopping spree and extravagant travel expenses that were seen as a betrayal of public trust. Henyard's leadership, which had promised revitalization and positive change, instead became marked by scandal and poor fiscal management. The public's frustration grew as Henyard's refusal to acknowledge or address these accusations only deepened the crisis. The mayor vetoed critical financial measures, such as the hiring of independent auditors to examine her spending, fueling suspicions about her true intentions. This refusal to cooperate further alienated both residents and local officials, leading to a complete breakdown of trust. What began as a base of support for Henyard quickly evaporated, with former allies on the board of trustees becoming some of her harshest critics by this point. Dalton's government was in disarray. The town's infrastructure was deteriorating, Its financial situation was worsening, and public services were rapidly declining. Town hall meetings, once a space for constructive discussion, turned into heated confrontations, with residents demanding accountability from their elected officials. Protests calling for Henyard's resignation grew louder, and social media campaigns calling for her removal gained momentum. The overwhelming public outcry made it clear that Henyard's leadership had lost the support of the very people she had promised to serve. Yet, in defiance of the growing pressure, she remained stubbornly unwilling to resign. Henyard's bizarre public behavior only worsened the situation. Instead of taking responsibility for the chaos she had caused, she arrived at public meetings with a golden microphone and allowed a DJ to play Rihanna's "Better Have My Money," as if mocking the severity of the crisis. These absurd gestures only deepened the divide between Henyard and the residents, showcasing her apparent incapacity or unwillingness to face the problems at hand. Her continued portrayal of herself as a misunderstood champion of the people alienated even her most ardent supporters, further exacerbating the situation amid the turmoil. Rumors began to circulate about Henyard's connections to Deputy Police Chief Ellis Lacey, who had been charged with bankruptcy fraud. These rumors raised suspicions that the corruption within Dalton's local government extended beyond Henyard herself, suggesting that her administration might have been complicit in a broader pattern of financial misconduct. The mounting evidence of corruption and financial mismanagement only fueled public distrust and further isolated Henyard from the community she had once served. In response to the growing concerns, Dalton's trustees took decisive action. They quickly moved to institute stringent financial controls, including banning Henyard from using local credit cards and launching preliminary investigations into her financial dealings. However, these efforts were not enough to prevent the ongoing deterioration of the town's infrastructure or halt the downward spiral of its finances. As debt continued to rise and critical projects stalled, residents began to fear that Dalton's hopes for revitalization under Henyard's leadership were slipping further away. The town, once seen as a symbol of potential progress, had become a stark example of mismanagement and failure as the FBI's investigation into Henyard's financial activities escalated. It became increasingly clear that the investigation would have significant consequences for Dalton. The mounting scrutiny and public outrage heightened the pressure on Henyard, but she refused to cooperate with efforts to address the crisis. Instead of showing leadership or a willingness to make amends, Henyard dug in her heels, further alienating the community and prolonging the uncertainty surrounding Dalton's future. The situation became even more dire as revelations of further financial mismanagement came to light. Reports of questionable spending and a lack of transparency in Dalton's budgeting process raised serious questions about the integrity of Henyard's leadership. What had once been viewed as a promising era of progress for Dalton had dissolved into a grim reality of scandal and neglect. The once hopeful vision for the town's revitalization was now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of a town on the brink of collapse. As Henyard's tenure became synonymous with financial instability, public unrest grew. The growing chorus of voices calling for her resignation reached a fever pitch, yet Henyard remained resolute in her refusal to step down. Her stubbornness and refusal to acknowledge the gravity of the situation only deepened the crisis, leaving Dalton in a state of limbo. The town's financial instability, deteriorating public services, and complete breakdown of political leadership created a perfect storm of dysfunction and despair. The investigation into Henyard's financial dealings continued to loom large over the town. As more details emerged, the extent of the damage caused by her leadership became increasingly apparent. The town was left grappling with the fallout from her actions, and many residents began to question whether Dalton could ever recover. With her refusal to cooperate with the investigation and her continued resistance to reform, Henyard's hold on power remained a looming threat to the town's future. Despite the growing calls for reform, Dalton's trustees found themselves in a constant battle to regain control of the town's finances and government. The damage caused by Henyard's leadership had left the town's political system in disarray, and efforts to restore stability were repeatedly thwarted by her defiance. The ongoing investigation, combined with the widespread public frustration, left Dalton in a state of uncertainty. With no clear path forward, Dalton's residents, once hopeful for change, were now left to wonder whether the town could ever recover from the profound damage caused by Henyard's leadership. The future of the town remained precarious as the investigation into her actions continued to unfold. With Henyard's tenure marked by scandal, financial mismanagement, and a breakdown of public trust, it seemed unlikely that Dalton could return to the promising future that had once seemed within reach. As the investigation continues and public outrage intensifies, the question remains whether Henyard will face the consequences of her alleged misconduct or continue to cling to power. Dalton's future depends on the resolution of this crisis, but it is unclear whether the town can recover from the damage done under her leadership. The scars left by her time in office will take years to heal, and the road to recovery will likely be long and fraught with obstacles. Henyard's legacy, once thought to be one of transformation and progress, now stands as a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked leadership and the consequences of disregarding public trust. As Dalton grapples with the fallout from her actions, the town's future remains uncertain. The residents of Dalton can only hope for accountability and the eventual return of stability. But the damage caused by Henyard's leadership may be too great to overcome for now. The town faces an upward battle to restore trust in local government and rebuild its fractured political and financial systems. The scars of Henyard's administration will linger, and the community must now decide whether they can rise above the turmoil to rebuild their town, or whether the damage done is too severe to ever fully overcome. Dalton's future is now a precarious one, and the road ahead remains uncertain.